Hey everyone, I'm Victoria Wilshire, and this is a special Halloween edition of Songtradr Happy Hour, and it just happens to be our lucky episode number 13. Hello to our audience, thanks for joining. If you have questions you'd like that our panelists to answer, get them into the Zoom and Facebook Live chat windows at any time during the session, and we'll get to as many as we can a bit later on. Now let's meet our panel. He is the former head of global music for the Coca-Cola Company and talent development at the publishing division of Maverick. You may have seen him featured or presenting at leading industry events like South by Southwest, Madonna Advertising Week, or lending his judging skills to the Clio Music and Global Effie Awards. He shared his thoughts as an industry leader on Variety, Forbes, NPR, CNN, Adweek, and more. He's recently launched the music division, which closes the gap between brands and music, which we like to hear. Today, he joins us on Happy Hour. We're really pleased to welcome Joe Belliotti. Hey, Joe.
Hello, how are you? Thank you.
Oh, thank you for joining. You're welcome. Next up on our panel is a music and media maven who's well qualified to weigh in on both the creative and business sides. He's an award-winning songwriter, producer, and composer, has scored music for TV and advertising, and his work with local and international artists has earned him a swag of top 10 records. He spent 7 years as head of creative and A&R at Aussie music company Alberts, and his music supervision talents can be heard on big brand campaigns such as Uber, Toyota, Mitsubishi, and more. Let's give a warm happy hour welcome to my fellow Aussie, Michael Shamalski.
Hi, how you doing? Morning,
Hello.
afternoon.
Morning, afternoon, all of that. So for everyone out there, you're calling from where, Michael?
Sydney, Australia.
Very nice. And Joe?
I am in Atlanta, Georgia.
That's good. And Joe, how do you feel about being sandwiched by two Aussies?
No, this is great. I love Australia. I probably should move there given what's going on here in this country now. So you got room for one more?
Sure, absolutely.
We've got stacks of room, but most of it's desert. So, knock yourself out. So look, our topic is making music for ads, the do's and don'ts. And so what I'd really love for us to do today is to unveil some of the mysteries behind what goes on in that pro world and how major ads find their music. Because I think for a lot of composers, artists, musicians out there, it can really feel like a maze, that sync licensing world. So it's so great to get you guys on, and I'm sure you're going to give us some really nice tips. Maybe Joe, if we can start with you. For all those people out there who have never been a global head of Coca-Cola, what's it like and what do you do? What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, I actually came from the music industry. I'll give you a little background just so you get a little context to how I ended up at Coke. But I came from the music industry. I was a musician, very bad musician when I was a teenager. So never had a chance to actually play music. So I absolutely respect and love people that do. But I tried to get into, I was in the music industry and music publishing. I got into music for film and TV. And then I got into music for advertising and marketing and started an agency in New York that helped brands connect with music. And then Coke came to me in 2010 and asked me to be the head of global music. And I basically told them, you got the wrong person. Like, I don't have an MBA, I'm not corporate. But they said they wanted someone from the outside. They wanted someone that knew the industry, knew the people, knew how to connect that outside world. So I joined in 2010. I stayed there through 2018. And I did everything from setting up the strategies for how we use music. I put the partnerships together, whether it was I put a Spotify partnership together. I created the first branded podcast series with iHeart. I created a live streaming channel. I would create music for our big campaigns like the World Cup and the Olympics and things like that. And basically it was really interesting because when I got there, the first person I spoke to was the head of global brand. And I said, listen, how do I be successful in this? What do I need to do? He's like, well, go learn how Coke makes money. And I'm like, okay, that should take me the rest of the afternoon. But it actually took me like 3 months, right? Because when you think about it, someone buys a Coke at a convenience store in Peru, how does that affect the bottom line of Atlanta? So when I learned about how the economics of the business worked and the distribution and the reselling and the customers and the value chain, then I was able to actually look at music and say, okay, we can use music to grow our brand and make Coca-Cola cool, right, and relevant, but we can also use it to create value, to our customers, to our retailers, to our hotel partners, airline partners. So I really tried to understand the business. And I think that's just something I've taken into my second life, or my fifth life, whatever you want to call this one, in the music division, where I kind of work as an outsourced music department, is try to understand, not just the brand from an emotional perspective, but try to understand the business they're in, how they make money, and where you can add value.
Yeah, great. And you said you played music badly. What did you play?
Yeah, I play guitar. Yeah, a little bit of piano. Yeah, and people always say, "Oh, you couldn't have been that bad," but no, I was that bad.
Or maybe someone was rude enough to tell you. I don't know.
Yeah.
So Michael, you have a unique perspective as well, because you've been a musician and artist as well as being on the other side of placing music. What are some of the roles that you've had?
So, I mean, I've sort of, been in the music industry since leaving school, and initially was songwriting, producing, playing in bands, and that kind of led through. I mean, I spent a lot of time doing that, and was quite lucky to have, work with a few artists that sold a few records, and it sort of pivoted to a point where I had an opportunity to write for picture. So I never done it before, and I was actually renting a space in a studio in Sydney, and that studio actually did quite a lot of ad work. And the owner of the studio was like, "Well, why, have you ever written for ads?" And of course I went, "Sure, I can do that." You just say, when you're a freelance songwriter or musician, you just say yes to everything and then figure it out later. And then, so that was kind of my first experience. And I was able to kind of then, work on a couple of quite a few campaigns. And then it sort of just kind of rolled on from there. The studio then kind of merged was purchased by a company called Alberts, which is a huge music publisher in Australia. Well, was. And then at that time, Alberts was looking at revitalizing, I guess, their contemporary side of the music publishing arm. And I was asked then to come on board and sort of be a driver for that. So I sort of kind of then went over to the A&R and creative side, and again, I was lucky enough to sign a few bands and artists that achieved some success, and then through that was probably my kind of the schooling when it came to music supervision and placing existing music for ads and how that worked. And to Joe's point, it's very much about understanding the brand and how they make money, and the brand personality. There's a whole lot of factors that sort of come to play when you're looking at finding the right piece of music for a spot. And that's kind of how I kind of arrived to where I am now, and that's kind of my bread and butter is very much about providing music solutions for brands, creative agencies, content creators. Essentially, if you're looking to work with music, then we can kind of make a way for that to happen.
Yeah, and this is fantastic. So let's go into the actual parameters that affect a music choice for an ad, because I think it's good for artists out there who are unfamiliar with the process to know that it's not always just about the song. It might be an amazing song, but it may not just be right. So perhaps, Joe, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the parameters that affect choices?
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to sort of wrap your arms around, because it is so subjective, and people will describe music differently and hear music differently. But I think you made a really great point, which is it's not always just about the song, and I think in order to get your song heard, you need to build a relationship with somebody, right? You need to build a relationship so someone's welcoming that song in and listening to it with friendly ears. And I think that's a big thing that artists need to think about, is that how do you build relationships with the supervisors, with brands? How do you keep that communication going? And I think part of that is it's sort of this sort of like soft touch. I'll give you an example. Actually, there was one kid who was amazing. I'm not going to say his name. But he was amazing at keeping me updated on everything that he did. And unfortunately, his music wasn't great, but he would send me the nicest notes, like, "Oh, I'm so excited. This just happened to me." Or something like, he never asked me for anything. He never pressured. He wasn't hard selling. He was constantly just keeping me updated. And I was rooting for him. And we would retweet some of his things and like do what we could do. But that to me, it's like, I walk away from 8 years with Coke and I remember him. because he tried to build a relationship with me and like, send me articles he thought I would think was interesting based on things I would tweet or put on LinkedIn. So I thought that was really nice. And that to me is really important, because then you're going to listen, with friendly ears, because I think that's the hardest thing, is getting listened to and getting listened to at the right moment. Because, Michael will say this, it's like, what you're looking for today is different than tomorrow, right? And if you're at a brand, maybe a brand might be looking for, or a brand manager who isn't really a music person at a brand might be thinking about music 1-2 times the entire year, right? So you have to stay, on people's radar in the right way. So I think, yeah, it's the songs are important, and Michael probably has a better idea of the criteria of songs, but again, the timing and the relationship building, I think, are equally as important.
Yeah, Michael, what do you think?
Oh, look, I mean, it's so vast. I mean, one of the funny things that always crops up in conversations is someone will send me a song or say, this is perfect for sync. And it's kind of like, I almost kind of like roll my eyes, because it's like, there's no such thing as a perfect sync song. It's whatever song works for the vision and helps convey ultimately what the vision is trying to communicate. And that can be absolutely anything. So I think as an artist trying to kind of get some activity in that space, I mean, look, there are certain genres that probably lend themselves more to brands. Brands don't generally kind of license, hardcore death metal. Not saying it doesn't happen, because there's potentially a spot that that's going to work for, but most of the time a brand that's selling you something wants you to feel a certain way, and it's generally positive about what they're trying to kind of communicate or sell. So then the music will often is required to support that. And there's, I think it's really important to understand the intent. What is the what roles does music play? Is it just there to provide, an underscore? Is there a lot of voiceover, for example? Is it there to kind of highlight certain parts of the vision? Is it there to kind of support a call to action? So, and this is where I guess the brief comes in, is really important, and understanding the brief. And from a music supervision perspective, that's where the skills of a music supervisor come into play. And it's ultimately that vast sea of music is based on what the brand is looking for, and the creative agency is looking for, is trying to find, 10 or 15 tracks that you can send to them that absolutely provide that solution.
Fantastic. So let's say that we have ad execs in a room, or whoever is sitting at the table. When does the conversation around music happen typically?
Typically, it varies. I mean, if you're lucky, it happens early in the piece. If, for example, the creative agency is working on a potentially new brand campaign, for example, so there you may have a few weeks to come up with some options, and at that point you may not have. There's no vision. You may have a very kind of rough. You may have an animatic, or you may have an animatic is just basically think of it like a hand drawn version of what the each kind of shot in the commercial will look like. So you may have that. You'll generally have a conversation with the producer and potentially one of the creatives at the agency that are working on the spot, and they'll say, look, it's for example, it's a brand spot. It's very much reinforcing the brand message. Traditionally, this is the type of music that we've used, but in this case, we're trying to shift to engage this demographic or this part of the market. Therefore, we're looking at music that does A, B, C, D. So then you've kind of got it's a bit of a roadmap to work to, and then from there, the supervisor's role is essentially to go, okay, well, based on those key points, what's going to potentially work for this. And other times, you literally have 24 hours to turn it around, and that can be because in the final edit, the client's looked at the agency's presented the spot to the client, and the client's gone, don't like the music. And then, this is a Thursday and it's potentially on air on the Sunday. So you have a very short time frame to find a bit of music based on the client feedback. So it does vary. And I think, listening to watching a lot of TV. not advocating just watching a lot of media and a lot of content, but you'll kind of get a sense of there are trends in what's being used for ads. More not so much now, but for example, a few years back, in Australia at least, everything was ukuleles, glockenspiels, and hand claps. Literally, if you if you wrote folk music, and even if it wasn't that great, then there was a time here where you could probably get a little bit of licensing activity. But then that shifted, and we were getting briefs from agencies that said, this is what we're looking for, but no hand claps, no glockenspiel, and no ukulele. So that sort of genre was saturated to the point where agencies were saying we're over that now. We're looking for something different. But there's so much music out there, and it's very much a blank slate.
Yeah. So Joe, when do you like to talk about the music aspect in ads?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. It depends on, sometimes there's ads that are shot that need music, and sometimes music is created for the ad. I like to do it in the very, very beginning. Like, I think, when a brand is creating a campaign, when they start creating the visual identity, they should start creating the musical identity and start thinking about music and talking about music. And it opens up so much more possibilities. I worked on a campaign earlier this year with a brand called Orange Theory Fitness, and we created a new song for their campaign with this artist, two-sister DJ group named Cruella, who are incredible. And they created a song that was inspired by the campaign that ended up being the song in the commercial, but they loved it so much they made it their first single, right? So these sort of magical things can happen where everything comes together, if you have the time to do that. So I think, from a timing perspective, it's always great to be able to have the luxury of time.
Yeah, and speaking of artists, sometimes it is about the brand looking for an artist that will fit the values of the brand or the, so it's not just about the track either, right?
It is. And, I like to tell artists to start thinking about themselves as a brand and what that means, because Coca-Cola doesn't go around saying, yeah, we're kind of like Pepsi or kind of like RC Cola, but an artist will say, oh, we're kind of like Coldplay and Travis. It's like, that doesn't do anything for me, right? I got Coldplay, I got Travis. But I think, like, if you're an artist, start talking about your brand in the context of, what it's going to do for people. How does it make people feel? What role does it play in people's lives? Like, hey, I make great energetic music. People love to work out for it. Great. If I'm Orange Theory Fitness, that's going to get my ear, right? If I say, I make the songs that just bring people together, people just love hearing these, and they share these songs with each other, and they have these really special moments. Like, great. Maybe there's some Valentine's campaign that could be interesting, but you're thematic. I think it all comes down to the way people, actual humans, listen to music, right? We select music based on our mood, the moment, the occasion, right? We don't select music based on genre anymore. We have access to everything, and kids today listen to everything, right? So I think genre is a wonky way of describing music, but I think, when we talk about the moods and the moments that music plays in your life, then it opens up a whole world of possibilities, right? Because then you could be a mattress company, right? And all of a sudden, music has a moment where, hey, I'm an artist. I recorded this entire record in my bedroom. We should do bedroom sessions together, right? You can kind of figure out, where does the mood of this, where does this product play a role in people's lives, and where does my music play a role, and kind of fit them together that way. So I like artists to think about themselves as brands, and how do you describe it, as opposed to just saying, we're like this. It's like, no, how do you make me feel? Like, what do you, who are you? What are you trying to put out into the world?
Yeah, I love that. Well said. And so all the things that you got teased for when you're a kid, they all become really unique when you're older. So guys, stay true, be unique, right?
Yeah.
So can we talk about the brief then? Because not everyone out there in the music world has ever received a brief to create music for an ad. How is it constructed typically? I don't know, Michael, do you want to take this one first?
It depends. I mean, the brief is, that's probably the most important part of the process, because that dictates ultimately the direction you're going when you're looking for music. I'll split in two parts. If you're looking, I mean, there's, if the brief is, we want an existing artist, and it's just say it's a brand that's looking for an existing artist. They want to, I guess, sort of leverage borrowed equity from a famous artist. So they're looking for big artists. Generally, you'll have a budget to work to. And then there'll be some, key points that the music has to kind of tick. Now, it can be as vague as we just want something that feels up and good. so all of a sudden then you have about 4 million songs to choose from. Other times it's more specific. There'll be a certain lyric that that they want in a track. It could be, sunlight, it could be, morning, it could be home. So then all of a sudden, okay, that you need a famous artist. They may specify a male or a female vocal. So the more detailed the brief is and the more questions, I guess, that you ask as a supervisor, then you're able to kind of zero in and sort of filter down to less than, a million songs. And then it's about figuring out, again, what will work for the communication. I mean, as you know, music has an incredible ability to affect the emotion of the audience. So, you can put two different tracks against the vision and create a completely different emotional response from a viewer. So, again, understanding what the emotion of the communication is and is to be conveyed is really vital. On the composition side, it's even trickier because ultimately you've got a blank slate. So if you're a composer, then the brief that's your roadmap as to what you're going to do. So sometimes you have some vision to work to, and sometimes you don't. So sometimes, it's early in the campaign and they want to compose a track. They may give you a couple of references. So they'll say, we love the drums on, this, on this track. We love the guitar sound on this track, and we love the atmosphere of this. So then as a composer, you've kind of got to go, okay, well, they love the drums on this, which is, they sound a certain way. I can do that guitar sound, and I need to kind of figure out how I can kind of create the atmosphere that they want from this, and then combine it into something that works to picture. And again, part of the role of a supervisor or a producer that's working on a campaign is to be able to convey that brief to the composer. And as a composer, you need to ask a lot of questions. If you're not sure, make sure you ask as many questions about the brief as possible, because ultimately you may interpret it one way, and then when you deliver something, the creatives at the agency will just go, this is not what we want. This is completely off the mark. And, that comes from experience as well. I've worked on campaigns where, a creative may say something like, "Oh, it just doesn't feel like it doesn't want to, it doesn't allow me to tap my feet or something." So you have to figure out, okay, so is that a tempo thing? Is it an instrumentation thing? And in this particular case, it was just adding a tambourine over the top of the track, and all of a sudden, the creative was really happy. So it's those kind of things. It's quite it's almost kind of like it's quite forensic when you dig down into figuring out what is it that's that a person needs musically to happen.
Yeah, so I guess it's learning a language, and specifically what should you be asking, like timeline for delivery, and what's the budget, and who else needs to be involved in this process. It's like all the business side of things, which, sometimes tough for composers to think that way, but I think it's pretty necessary to ensure the success of the job. Joe, do you like to work directly with the musicians and artists, or how do you create briefs and send them out?
No, I do. I like to work directly, but I also like to, like you said, it's like acting as a translator. Right. And the more inputs we can get from the brand and the agency, if there is one, or whoever the team is around the project, the more inputs we get, the better. And it starts to form sort of a clearer picture, because, the artists that we work with, maybe work to a brief once or twice in their life. Like, they're not accustomed to working to brief. Right. So you kind of have to, it's more about inspiration and creating the right sort of context. And, like Michael said, lyrical themes and things like that. But I also think there's an important element of when you're pitching to a brief, when you're trying to answer a brief, which is, I don't know if this is true, the same in film and TV, but I know in brands and agencies, we like to hear the obvious, right? So when someone pitches songs for a brief, usually it comes in a playlist and that's it. I think that artists and whoever's pitching should take each song and tell me exactly why you think this is perfect, right? Break it down for me. Tell me this lyric here speaks to this, and this is this, and this. Just tell me the obvious. What is obvious to you, tell it to me again, right? Because then I can use that to sell in the song, right? And then what that might even do, it might even stop you from pitching some songs. I'm gonna like call out nobody in particular, but a million people during the Rio Olympics a few years ago pitched me Rio by Duran Duran. And I'm like, how is that a good fit? It's about a river in Texas. The Olympic Games are in Brazil. Like, it's like, just because it has the same name, you know, if you think about this, it doesn't really fit. It has no relevance to what we're talking about. So I think that too will help you be discerning on what you're pitching to people and why. And again, like really like, sell yourself, or just articulate how this is really answering what people are asking for.
Right. And what's your advice then to composers or artists who've never been through the re-editing and the re-editing process, where they've submitted their work and it's being sent back to them and it goes through multiple rounds, because that's kind of a natural thing, right?
Yeah, it is. And you know what? Listen, I don't know how composers do it, honestly, because, somehow you have to detach yourself from your work, but you can't really detach yourself from your work, but luckily, like when there's people like Michael or myself involved in that, we can sort of like pump the brakes when it's being pushed too far in the wrong direction and kind of course correct before, we just go back to composers and artists just for random, rewrites and edits and things like that, because it's got to be a grueling process, so. Yeah, it's I hate to say you have to disconnect yourself from it to a certain degree, but I guess you have to. I wouldn't know. I'm lucky not to have to do that. But Michael, you're perfect for this, like, because you're a composer and you're in the middle of it, right?
Yeah, and you're 100% correct. I mean, you just have to expect that revisions are part of the process. And as as a composer that's writing for ads, again, if you understand the brief and you get a great brief, your chances of actually getting close to the mark off the bat are really much higher. But revisions can be, and they can come from the agency, then the agency may present to the client, and then the brand will have input. And so, as someone in the middle, it's about, it's about taking all the feedback and trying to, again, decipher exactly what it is about the track that they want changed. Because again, it may not be anything that drastic. It may be, okay, just because they're talking in a certain way, it may only be a tambourine, or it may only be changing the bass note underneath that chord that creates the lift that they're looking for. So it's those kind of subtle things that, again, you learn from experience. But if you're a composer, then you just have to expect that, that it can be quite brutal. And also particularly time frame can be, is something you need to watch as well. I mean, to take that, an example I pointed out a little earlier about, the client being presented a track and they're just not liking it. At that point, for example, if they had a commercial track on the spot, they may decide, we're not going to go down looking for another commercial track. We're just going to go down a composition route. And again, this may be a Wednesday afternoon when the ad's on TV on Sunday. So as a composer, you'll have to then deliver a finished piece of music that works to the spot with all the revisions between sort of Wednesday afternoon and sort of Friday afternoon before it's dispatched. So, you need to be, there's certain things you need to be really fast. You need to know your tools really well. Your workflow has to just be, down pat. So that you can start composing, you can start working without kind of, figuring out where your sounds are or trying to kind of mix your drums. Having templates that have, a great sounding rock kit, a great sounding electronic kit, a great sounding trap kit, whatever it is, all ready to go, so that no matter what the brief is, you can basically get going with some core sounds that sound great from the beginning. So it's things like that are really important, and it's what trips up, I guess, composers that haven't done it before. There was an amazing artist, electronic producer from Brisbane, which is north of Sydney, and I actually thought he'd be great writing for a TVC, and I sent the track to his manager, and this was he had the luxury of about a week to turn this around, and he just couldn't do it. He said, I can't write music in a week, and I thought I could. So some artists just aren't cut out for it, and that's totally fine. But yeah, I mean, I think workflow and being able to work quickly are an absolute must.
And a good supply of coffee.
Coffee. Sleep is overrated if you're a composer. There'll be times where you will not get a lot of sleep.
Yeah, and like, don't pig out on pizza and chips and all of that, because like you just kind of, it might be good at first, but you'll probably slow down real quick after that, right?
Yeah.
I've seen the inside of a few studios where it's just built in the corner. So would you advise the composers to, let's say they weren't given any visuals, to try to test something to picture before they send it in? What about you, Joe? Oh, Michael, please jump in.
I was going to say, I mean, if the brief from an agency is we're looking for, for this kind of style, then generally, I mean, there's no point in you finding vision that's going to work for that. Essentially, all you're doing is supplying what the agency's needs based at that point in time. Most of the time with composition, though, you'll get you'll get a rough edit, or they'll have edited stock footage. So you kind of get a feel for what the ad's going to look like with stock footage before they shoot it. So you kind of get a bit of an idea of the arc, of, where the kind of hit points are. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, Joe, you were going to jump in. Did you want to add something?
No. I think that's exactly right. I mean, it's if you have the luxury of being able to see the animatic or the cutter or whatever it is, it's great. But sometimes you don't, right?
Yeah, right. I'm feeling like this is a little bit animatic. Like I put on my best kind of interior designing chops and just like strung a few things up. So let's say then, who usually makes the final decision on music? And I know it varies, obviously, but let's say if we're talking, in advertising, who's typically involved in the conversation and actually making the decisions?
Yeah, everybody and nobody.
That's helpful.
Yeah, it really is. No, I mean, I'm kind of joking, but I'm not. I mean, I think it really is everybody and nobody, and I think that's why, from a composing thing, it's a different thing, right? It's more of a, I hate to use this word, but a vendor relationship, right? I'm kind of working with you and I'm going to figure it out. We're going to get something composed. But when you're talking about getting your songs placed or getting, something that's a little more, of a brand partnership type of thing, that's where you really have to, build yourself and sell your story and give people, get people to fall in love with you, through, like I said, the way you present yourself, the way you describe yourself, just the way you describe knowing your fans. Like, this kills me. Like, I really want artists to know who their fans are, and not just from a demographic perspective. If you say, it's 18 to 54 and they're half men, half women, and they're culturally diverse, it's like, great. That's 90% of the world, like tell me, if your fans love the outdoors, if you're working on a spot for REI and your fans love the outdoors and they love camping, it's like, great. That's really cool to know that your fan base resonates with the type of consumer that they're looking to connect with, right? And I think all that sort of information really helps out in offering things that you can do to add value. Hey, we can do this as an exclusive release. If you use my song, we'll do a live stream. I'll do a free live stream concert for your, customers on your Instagram, sort of like, stacking the deck in your favor and putting more value out there. And I think those type of things help. They're tiebreakers sometimes.
Yeah. Marco?
In as far as the decision making process goes, I mean, typically it's kind of twofold. Ultimately, it's the client who approves it. So if a creative agency will be working, with brand X, for example, they will come up with the creative behind the campaign. So at that point, the client would have signed off on the approach. So when it comes to the execution, which is obviously shooting the footage, getting the right talent in on the ad, and obviously the music, ultimately it's the creative team that will initially approve whatever music's used, whether it's composition or a licensed piece. But then ultimately they've got to present that to the brand before it's on air. And at that point, the brand may say, you know what, we're not liking this or that. And at that point, then it's having to kind of rework. It could be the vision, it could be the edit, or it could be the music. So you're kind of not out of the woods, even if the agencies love the track. It's ultimately they present it to their client, and then it has to go through that, another round of approvals.
Yeah, a lot of hoops, huh? Yeah, so to get your jumping shoes on. All right, so can we talk about the kind of more sticky side of things? And I mean sticky as in really sticky, like in agreements and contracts, that kind of thing. What are some things that should be looked out for by composers? And should they find someone to check the contract first? Joe, do you want to start here?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you need someone to check contracts. I mean, it's tough because when you're working in music, there's no shortage of supply, so you have very little leverage, right? So sometimes you're going to get deals that they're just not going to be great, right? And you have to sort of weigh the opportunity and say, all right, maybe the money's not there, maybe the term is too long, or maybe it's a buyout versus a license. And you're just going to have to weigh opportunities, and decide for yourself what you feel comfortable with. I mean, there's no other way. Like, you got to go to sleep at night, so you're going to have to make that decision for yourself. But there's really no right or wrong answer to it. I mean, sometimes you've got to, take a deal that's just unfavorable. And, but that said, you should do everything you can to protect yourself. I mean, everyone should, as an artist, and, this is your work, this is your livelihood, you should be well versed in this. And if you're not, or even if you are, you should have an attorney that can help you walk you through this, every step of the way.
Yeah, good advice. Michael, agree?
100%. I think, Joe, the idea of not understanding how music rights work and what you control is nowadays, particularly as an independent musician, where you can put your music, you can have it released worldwide within a few minutes. Having an understanding of how the rights work, what you control, what you can license on is really important. I know if I'm looking at, as a music supervisor, if I'm looking to work with an independent artist, I would say, particularly if you're in a band, have a band agreement, and the agreement will state, someone who can approve licenses. Because I've been in the situation where I've sent an email to a band that doesn't have a manager, saying, hey, I think this track that you've written would be great for this spot. Who can approve it? And then you kind of 2 days later, you get an email going, oh, I've got to speak to my mate who's, he works Fridays and Saturdays. I can't get a hold. I mean, there's all these kind of, scenarios where it just gets too hard. So you move on to the next artist. So having, being able to approve, having an approval party in a band is really important. So one person is designated as, yes, you can sign off on that. It may also pay to kind of have some basic license agreements. So spend a bit of money with a lawyer and have your own agreements. And not to get too deep into the rights, but obviously there's two rights that you have when you have the rights in the recording and the rights in the composition. Particularly if you're working with a smaller, it could be a media agency or a production company, where they may say, we'd love to use that track for a 3-month online, advertorial for this brand. So our budget's $2,000. Just send me your agreements, and we'll we're all good to go. So at that point, if you've got a basic publishing agreement and a publishing licensing agreement and a master licensing agreement, then you can kind of just fill in the blanks, fill in the usage, and then send it to the brand to sign off. So all of a sudden, that part of the transaction is in your control, because the agreements are agreements that you've drafted with a lawyer. And then there's there's various platforms and companies that will will do that for you as well, and obviously take a commission. Music publishers obviously do that, but I think understanding how that whole world works, and that's a whole nother session, is absolutely vital. And if you're an independent artist, you need to know all about those rights and how they can affect how you earn income.
Yeah, and like you said, sometimes the delivery cycle is just so small that you guys get your things together.
Answer your email.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, the approval. Yeah, I mean, like I see, unfortunately, like you just have to, like, you can't wait for approvals, and you just move on to the next one on some of these projects. You're so absolutely right. It's a great point.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? And we're always reaching out to artists for various things, and often we don't get answers. So it's like a business, and it's really unfortunate because the song might be amazing and perfect, but you just can't use it. And so another thing that maybe would be good to share with our audience out there is expectations on payment, because I know that often payment is a very stressful area for a lot of artists. And so maybe it's just understanding that you have to go through payment cycles, and different companies take longer or different times to pay. So I don't know if you guys want to weigh in on that at all, add some more flesh to that one. Yeah, Joe, Michael.
I mean, most brands say they have a net 30, when they get the invoice, you'll get your payment within 30 days. I think it's more like net 300. Actually, like I my experience is with agencies, they actually are very, very good and quick to pay. Like I have really, thankfully, have not seen, any issues where I've had to chase up payments. If I had, it was just a clerical error, especially when it comes to, payments for artists. I think, I don't know. I've seen bands be really brands and agencies be really sympathetic and try to turn that around as fast as possible. So, I'm sure there are issues, but I don't see it. Just make sure you have know how to invoice, right? Use QuickBooks. Make sure there's an address. Make sure how you're going to receive the money. Make sure you know how to send a proper invoice, and make sure the purchase order number's on it. All the mechanics of what the company needs to pay you quickly. If you're doing what you can do, 99% of the time they'll do what they can do.
Yeah,
very much so, and it's a good point. I mean, that side, the accounting and business side, the accounting and financial side, you've got to treat yourself as a mini business, whether you're a solo artist or whether you're a band. So just having all that set up, ready to go, is really important. I mean, agencies will have various kind of payment terms, and generally that's communicated at the beginning of the transaction. So you'll know when you invoice whether you're going to get paid in 30 days or 60 days. And that's just that's part of I guess part of the process. You can't really demand payment in 4 days or a week if the agency has a payment cycle of 30 days, for example. So that you just have to factor that into your cash flow as a working artist.
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully you've got your rent covered elsewhere. Okay, so we've maybe got time for one more thing before we go to questions. Do you guys want to share any major mistakes you've made in your careers? And, really only just because if someone's an artist or maybe wanting to break into the ad world, they could avoid those mistakes. So from that point of view, you're doing a service.
I mean, we got to start a whole new webinar for this. I mean, I could go on. No, I mean, it's always constant learning, right? But I'm gonna use this to sort of just give some experience from Coke and around what artists should be doing. And listen, I'm just telling you what worked for me. Not going to work for every brand, but don't be afraid to reach out. So many artists get opportunities, and even when we were at Coke, because they tweeted at us. Hey, I love your brand. Oh, hey, I love you did this. They sent us compliments. Hey, I'm an artist. Do you have anything going on? Through Twitter. We had an artist create a video of themselves with Coke, signage in the background. They're like, hey, we filmed this at a bar. It had Coke signs. We thought you might like it. We're like, great. We ended up doing 5 or 6 things with this emerging artist, right? Through Twitter. like reach out, like actually like, and reach out in the right ways. You know, I know there's a producer, there's a big e-commerce company earlier this year. There's a producer, independent producer that went to them and said, hey, I have an album. If you pre-package this album with your stuff, we can share the profits. And they did it, and they both made a ton of money. You know, it was great for both of them. Like, reach out, go to them. You know, don't go to them and say, hey, what can we do? Can we do something together? Like, that's not, you know, that's not really going to help, you know, your situation. But go to them with ideas. Say, hey, I have an idea. I have a thought. You know, I love your brand. You know, I thought we could do this. Look at influencers. Influencers do a great job of working with brands, because a brand goes to the influencer and they help create the content. They know their audience. They can target their audience, right? And they spend all this money in influencer marketing. They should be spending it in music marketing, right? But music's a little more complicated. You got to make it simple for companies to get in business with you. And don't be afraid to put it out there and offer things to them and make suggestions and give thought starters, and, you know, just show that sort of enthusiasm, because I'm telling you, it works. It's not going to work every time, but it really does work.
Yeah, so get creative and be proactive. That's great advice. Michael, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think that, you know, particularly, you know, I was on a panel once, and one of the questions was from an artist who said, how do we get your attention? And it was, you know, it was the collective. There was myself and a few other music supervisors and A&R people, and an A&R person next to me just stood up and said, I have 2 words, don't suck. And there is so much music out there. I think the mistake that most artists and composers make is settling for something that is kind of good enough. You have to be extraordinary. And if you're really good, then you get noticed. And it's the, you know, music has a weird way, great music has a weird way of finding its way to people who make decisions. For that to happen, though, it's a combination of luck, but also you just have to, you know, if you write 100 songs, probably 5 are going to be great. You know, there was not many of us were anointed at birth as genius songwriters. So most successful artists and songwriters become great because they just work incredibly hard at writing the best song that they ever can. And I think that that's probably the biggest mistake. Is the tools to create now are everywhere. You can create a beat on your phone and release it, you know, have it released worldwide in an hour. Doesn't mean it's any good. Doesn't mean anyone's going to pick up on it. So you just need to be really, you need to nail your craft and just be amazing at whatever it is you do.
Fantastic. And not speaking personally, right, Michael? You've never made that mistake, yeah?
Yeah, never.
Never. Let's go to some questions. We've got a few coming in, so thanks, guys, for doing that. From Facebook, Monica Rizzio. What is the best way for indie artists to break into the ad world with their music? And I guess we've kind of answered a little bit, but shall we dive into it a little bit more? Who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I think, yeah, we talked about a few things. One, it's like building relationships, being proactive with the research, knowing the brands, the company, the people you're speaking to. You know, if you're talking to a music supervisor, you know, you're making an introduction, you know who they are, what they've done, compliment them. You know, if you like what they do, or don't reach out to them if you don't, but compliment them, you know, if you like what they're doing. Try to build a relationship, try to tell them about you as an artist, tell them about your music, you know, not in a sort of sterile way around, I have this many Facebook fans and this many things. Just like try to build, you know, an emotional connection to your music, and then find the right way to keep following up. You know, if you think about it, there's, you know, hundreds and hundreds of music supervisors and thousands of brands and thousands of agencies. There's a lot of ground to cover. And, you know, you're not going to pick up the phone and hit somebody at the right time. You're going to have to, you know, pick up the phone or send that email, you know, constantly. And just, you know, it's almost like you got to build yourself a little, you know, system to constantly keep in touch with the people that are important to you. Select the brands that you really want to be in business with, do the research, and just, you know, be, you know, in a nice way, you know, proactive and on top of them.
Great. Michael? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that 100%. I think that 100%. What Joe's kind of saying, it's like, you know, you got to have a little bit of kind of front and be bold and kind of
Oh dear.
put yourself out there. But the other thing is just, you know, be on a platform like Songtradr. It's like I've found, you know, a half a dozen artists that I placed in spots from searches that I've just done using that. And you know, I think you know, there's multiple ways you've got to approach it. There's not a single one approach. But yeah.
Yeah, great. I love it. Let's go to a question from Zoom. Sebastian Renert. Maybe Renert. When getting a brief, is it recommended to send a few examples which fit? And how much is song length a factor?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, if you're just submitting songs that you think may work, have a couple, have two, you know, at least, you know, a handful that you think will work to the brief. To Joe's earlier point, you know, if you've got some vision, edit the song to the vision so that you've got the parts that work. You know, it may be the chorus may be 2 minutes in, and that's the part that works to the vision. But if you submitted the whole song, you know, if a time poor creative is listening to the track, they may get to, you know, 1.5 minutes in the track and going, oh, this is not working, and move on. So direct the client to you know, what's working. And if you're a composer, you absolutely have to do more than, you know, at least an A and a B track, maybe, and if you have time, a third option as well.
Great. Yeah, Joe, what do you think?
I think you nailed it. Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, and song length, is that a factor? So maybe, you know, don't go 10 minutes or something.
No. Yeah, no. And again, it's just zeroing in on what part of the song works. You know, if it's the hook, then say, this is the hook. It works because of, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, or perhaps would you recommend sending like a full length and then a section that you think really works? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Good. All right. Facebook, Mickey Young. What's the typical budget made available for an indie artist song being used in a spot or a campaign? Ooh, money. Yes.
It really depends. You know, I've been able to kind of place, you know, indie artists. It depends on the usage. So, for example, I placed an artist, you know, that had a fairly reasonable kind of profile. So a little bit of Triple J. Triple J is like a community radio station, very famous one in Australia, that, you know, highlights indie bands. So, you know, this artist had a little bit of activity on, you know, a few plays on Triple J, decent streams. I mean, there was probably about 200,000 or 300,000 monthly streams, and it was for a major TVC. So it was for a major credit card brand, and it was on free-to-air television, online. So pretty much all media. And for that, it was, you know, the fee was around $75,000 total. So a huge win for an independent artist, but that's also because it was a lot of media. And if, for example, it was online only, then the fee would be a lot less. If you're a well-known band, then, you know, the fees here can be anywhere from, you know, north of 150,000 right up to, you know, if you're the Beatles or, you know, Rolling Stones or Bowie, $500,000-$600,000. The fees are very much depend on the profile of the artist, and also the usage. So the media, the term, all that kind of stuff. And then there's, you know, if you're lucky enough to get a global spot, then, you know, that's where, you know, artists can be set up for life just off one ad.
Yeah, amazing. Joe, what do you think?
No, it does. It runs the gamut. I mean, you know, I've been lucky. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on emerging artists, or hundreds of dollars, you know, but I think one thing that just came to mind, like on the fee structure thing, like sometimes those $100 things turn into bigger things, you know, within the brand. And, you know, don't always discount them, but also set yourself up for success and like future work. You know, if I was an artist, and I do this for some of my, you know, deals for the artist, is I build options in so the client knows if they want to take this spot and they want to air it for another 6 months, or if they want to air it on TV, they know how much it's going to cost, right? And that actually might even incentivize them to say, oh, it's only, the music's not going to cost us that much, or, they have some visibility into it when they're planning. So I like to build options into things, even if they're not asked for, because who knows, right? It's always good to have it. But I think, the smaller things sometimes really do lead to bigger things,
Yeah, that's such a great point too, because I know as an ex-artist that sometimes I thought that my art was divine, and maybe it was, who knows, on some planet, but sometimes it's better just to get that opportunity, and it may only be $100 license, but it could be a stepping stone to other things. And if you get that placement, you can actually leverage it on social media, can't you? People aren't going to see the dollars attached to it, and that can grow your presence, right? And get attention from guys like you.
It's airplay.
Yeah.
You guys spoke at the same time. So
go ahead, Michael.
No, I was going to say those opportunities are, when you look at it as airplay, and particularly if you're an artist that's looking to increase audience reach and engage, a broader audience, then all that plays into that kind of plan. It's really important though that as an artist, again, if you're lucky enough to get an opportunity where your music's licensed, is make sure you capitalize on it. What else can you do around that, so that you're maximizing that opportunity? Because otherwise it can just be like a blip in your kind of like a speed bump in your kind of roadmap for the year, where you can kind of look at that and go, well, I'm actually, maybe you'll release an EP around that time, and then you can kind of use that license spot as a way to kind of create more awareness. So it's really important to if you're lucky enough to get those opportunities, apart from getting some cash, is what you can do to kind of maximize the fact that your music will be out there in another way.
Yeah, cash helps. Joe,
No, you're absolutely right, and it works. And there's so many stories I could tell you, and there's one in particular. There was an artist from Sweden. This manager came to me at Midem one year, and he's like, "Oh, you used my band song in a digital commercial." I'm like, "Okay, I guess we did. I didn't really do it, right?" He's like, "Well, we ended up getting a lot of press in Sweden for that, and then we did a tour of radio stations, and it was it helped launch our." I'm like, "That's amazing! That was so But there are those stories where those things do happen. But again, it's it's to your point. It's this is what else can you do? What is it, the catalyst to spark, right? To get more, momentum going behind your career, your story, the opportunities you want to pursue.
Can I also add to this that I think it's really important for people like us looking for music, collect your placements. If it gets placed in a video, it doesn't matter if it's a local TV station or a local radio, whatever, collect them all, put them all on your site, whatever that site that may be, whether it's YouTube, whatever, and have them all presented nicely so that when we're looking at your profiles, we actually see your work there in one easy swoop. There are so many sites we look at which are like ghost towns, and so you don't know what's going on. I'm sure you guys agree with that, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, a couple more questions. Let me see. Juan M. Ponciano from Facebook. How important are number of streams on socials to brands and executives?
It kind of depends. If again, to an earlier point I was talking about, I mean, if the brand is looking to, leverage on the borrowed equity of a well-known artist, then yes, they'll be looking for a level of engagement that you have with an audience. So streams may be important, but a lot of the times they're just looking for the right bit of music for the spot, and they don't really care where it comes from. And in that case, that can be the catalyst of something big, because, you could be an artist with 100 streams a month that goes to 1.5 million streams just on the fact of it was a great fit for the vision. And I've seen that happen many times where an artist has kind of been plodding along and has scored a license on on a TV show, or a brand campaign, and then all of a sudden people are going, what's that song? What's that song? What's the song? And when they find it, their streams just literally within a month go ballistic.
Mm.
Yeah. So keep in mind, the brand and agency people we're talking about here don't have the context that we have on this call. So what I frequently get is someone will come to me and say, hey, this artist, they have 1 million streams. Is that good?
Mm.
They don't know, right? 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, 50,000, they don't know, right? So it's great to throw out these numbers, but you have to throw it out to people that in like, you know, the context, like, you know, your mom and dad don't know how many Spotify streams is good, right? So you got to almost like, and not that these people are not smart, they're incredibly intelligent. They just don't have the same context as you to say. So when you give them facts and stats and, you know, how many streams you have or how many Facebook fans you have or how much engagement you have, build some context around it. Say, hey, this is really good for an emerging artist. You know, we're one of the few artists in our, you know, area that's doing this successfully, right? There's got to be some context that they can see so they know what you're, you know, what you're sending them, you know, what it means.
Yeah. Okay. That really makes sense. I think we have time for one more question, and there's one from Jimmy Amani. Hi, Jimmy. Yeah, maybe it's the Jimmy we know. Would be. To each panelist, what are your top 3 favorite pieces of music placement in ads and why?
Well.
Okay. Thanks, Jimmy. Top 3.
That's homework.
Yeah, who's asking? How about maybe what about just one favorite piece of music placement in ads? Doesn't have to be one that you've placed either, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll go first. So I think that I really love, and I know I worked on it, but I really can't take any credit for it because it was Cruella who created an amazing track. I really love the song they created for the Orange Theory spot. They just understood that brand and the energy and everything about it, and they're just so incredibly. I mean, if you know them, you know they're fantastic. But if you don't know them, they're just underrated. They're just phenomenal. And the way they were able to sort of just so passionately kind of, you know, absorb that brand and bring it to life through music was just incredible. And, you know, so that was one. But I think my all-time favorite music brand is the Wiz Khalifa Oreo spot that came out a few years ago. We're on the Playful campaign. I thought that was the most brilliant use of music in advertising ever, where it's just him and his son sitting there playing in their home and, you know, eating cookies, and he's like singing this little rap about an Oreo, and it's just so, it felt so genuine, and I believed every moment of it. So that's one of my favorite all-time, you know, brand things, I guess.
Okay, so that's one. You've only got 2 more to go. I'm kidding. Michael?
This is so tough because there's so many. There's been so many amazing ads. I think from a global perspective, there's, I mean, obviously that one with the Sony bouncing balls with Jose Gonzalez track was a pretty powerful, you know. It's a really good example of a great marriage between the vision and the music. But there's actually a local ad, and this is going to sound, I don't know why this popped in my head, particularly at 10:30 in the morning, but it was a Benny Benassi track that was used for a beer ad, and essentially the concept of the ad was a tongue, just a tongue that came out of an esky and sort of floated around, stole this beer, and would deliver it to a punter at a party, and it was just another really, really clever, a great creative idea, but the track just worked really well. And there were people who had no idea who Benny Benassi was. All of a sudden, he basically had a commercial hit here off the back of that ad. But it was another great kind of ad. I don't know why, because it's thinking about beer at 10:30 in the morning. But anyway, it's Friday, so.
Hey, what can I say? Aussies love their beer. You know, I actually remember that ad. That was hilarious. Right. Well, look, that's all we have time for. I can't believe it's just flown, right? We have come to another end of Happy Hour. Joe and Michael, thank you so much for your time today. Fantastic insights from both of you. You're both awesome. Thank you also to our audience in here and out there, and for all of your questions. We hope you found this happy hour valuable. You'll be able to view the full session on YouTube tomorrow. Look out for the link in the webinar follow-up email or the post on our social channels, and let us know in the comments what you would like us to talk about on these happy hours. We only have a couple more shows till the end of the year, folks. In the next episode, the power of women in music. Tune in to hear how some of our female movers and shakers are making things work in the industry their way. So details coming up soon. Be kind to each other, everyone. See you in a couple of weeks for our next happy hour. Cheers.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.